Hello everyone, and welcome back to PickleFlick, and welcome back to RX 9060 XT Tested, the series where I test games on the RX 9060 XT and find the best settings for performance and visual quality. Today we're taking a look at Cyberpunk 2077, so let's dive in. Starting at 1080p high, the game felt smooth and responsive throughout my testing and looked great. Night City looked detailed and vibrant with plenty of visual detail in the streets, buildings and lighting effects. While walking around the city I saw frame rates between the high 70s and high 90s. Then I jumped in my car and the FPS ranged between the mid 60s to the low 90s. While in combat they stayed between the mid 70s and the high 80s. This setting provided the smoothest overall experience and never felt sluggish even during busier moments. And then we switched up to 1080p Ultra. The game still felt smooth and responsive, but I honestly struggled to notice much visual difference compared to the high settings during normal gameplay. There were some small improvements to shadows, lighting and overall image quality, but nothing that stood out enough for me to justify the performance loss. While walking around, the performance ranged between the mid 60s to the low 90s. And again, I got in my car and then they were between the mid 50s to the low 80s. While during combat they sat between the low 60s to the mid 70s. If you're focused on getting the best balance between visuals and performance, I'd stick with high. Then we moved on to 1440p high. The increase in resolution was immediately noticeable. The game looked a lot sharper, text and signs were clearer, and distant objects had more detail. Performance did take a bit of a hit compared to 1080p, but the game still felt responsive and enjoyable to play. While walking around, the FPS ranged between the low 40s to the high 50s. When I got in my car, they then dropped down to the mid 30s to the low 50s. While in combat, they stayed between the mid 30s and the high 40s. If you're happy with sacrificing some frame rate for a sharper image, this is definitely a good option. And finally, I moved to 1440p Ultra. Once again though, I did find it difficult to notice a major visual difference compared to the higher setting. The game still looked fantastic, but the extra visual quality wasn't enough to outweigh the performance drop. Speaking of which, while walking around, the FPS ranged from the low 30s to the low 50s. And then again, in the car, they dropped to the low 20s through to the mid 30s. While in combat, they ranged between the mid 30s and the high 40s. Personally though, if I was playing at 1440p, I think I would definitely choose the high setting over Ultra every time. My brain then thought it would be a good idea to test ray tracing on a Psycho preset. Unfortunately, this was a complete no-go on the RX 9060 XT. Frame rates were typically between 2 and 10 FPS. That's right, 2. Turning the game into a complete slideshow. Menus became sluggish, not that I was able to get into any. Camera movement felt extremely choppy and the game was effectively unplayable. It was so bad that I wasn't even able to properly test walking, driving or combat. Okay, here's a bit you've been waiting for, the Pickle score. Gameplay experience gets a 5 out of 5. The game felt smooth, responsive and enjoyable throughout testing, particularly at 1080p high. For the performance, it gets a 4 out of 5. Performance was excellent at 1080p high and still enjoyable at 1440p high. Although things started to struggle at ultra settings and ray tracing was completely off the table. Visual quality gets a 5 out of 5. Night City looks absolutely fantastic. Detailed environments, impressive lighting and a huge amount of atmosphere, even without ray tracing enabled. And for the optimization, this gets a 3 out of 5. The game runs well at high settings, but the jump to Ultra doesn't provide enough visual improvement to justify the performance loss, and ray tracing Psycho is simply unplayable on the RX 9060 XT. So what is the final Pickle score? Cyberpunk 2077 earns a crunchy Pickle, which is 4 out of 5. The game looks fantastic, performs well at 1080p high and remains enjoyable at 1440p high. While ray tracing is completely off the table and ultra settings don't provide enough visual improvements to justify the performance loss, the overall experience is still excellent on the RX 9060 XT. My recommended setting is 1080p high for the best balance of visuals, performance and overall gameplay experience. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and let me know in the comments what games you'd like to see tested next. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next RX 9060 XT tested episode.